All right. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today as we talk about understanding positive risk in project management. My name is Denise Benson, and I am a PMP and PMI RMP certified professional with experience in project management and risk analysis. So I'm so excited to have you with us today. I'm representing Blue Summit. We are a project management training and consulting business. We provide project management training in PMP, ACP, and CAPM certifications. We also do workforce development and instructional design. We're going to talk today a little bit about how to approach risk with a positive mindset. So this is one of the things that often gets overlooked when people are doing risk management for their projects. So we wanted to go ahead and touch on that a little bit today to help broaden your understanding of that. I am on the chat and also have the Q&A. So if at any point you have questions, you can just drop a question into the chat. If you want me to address it while I'm giving the presentation, or if you just want to wait to the end, you can put it in the Q&A and we'll go through any questions there. All right. Managing risk is a fundamental part of any project. And today we want to look at a structured approach to understanding positive risk and how we can apply those as we go through the project management, risk management process. So we're just going to discuss that over the next hour and make sure we both understand the differences between negative and positive risk as well. So to get started, I want to first define by what we mean by risk in project management. So this is really important to understand the foundation of risk because it's going to help us better recognize both the challenges and opportunities that are presented to us in managing a project. So we define risk as an uncertain event or condition that can impact a project. So the key word here is uncertain. That means referring to something that may or may not happen in the future. So it's important because one of the things that people often confuse when doing project management or taking their PMP exam is the difference between a risk and an issue. So again, risk is something that may or may not happen, and an issue is something that has happened and needs to be addressed immediately. So when we're talking about risk, we're always talking about the possibility. So often, just by hearing the word risk, automatically what comes to mind is some sort of negative context, right? Like danger, some failure, impending doom. It's always associated with those bad things, those negative things. And this is pretty normal because that's just how we normally use the term risk when we're talking about, or how we use the word in the English language, right? So risk is usually talking about what are all the things that could go wrong. However, especially in dealing in project management, we're more talking about the question or examining all the possibilities of things that could go wrong or right. So that's where we really want to focus today is how we take it from the approach of looking at all the things that could go right with our project and that could add opportunity and possibilities throughout the execution of our project to make it even greater than maybe we had originally planned it or intended. So now we want to look at the difference between negative risk and positive risk. So a negative risk is something that, if it occurs, is going to have a negative impact on our project. So this could mean causing schedule delays, increasing the cost, reducing the quality, or even negating the entire business value of the project, right? So when we're looking at negative risk, there are changes that could happen, especially external changes, that could make the entire purpose of our project null and void. So you want to make sure as you're doing project management, you're looking at all those things. But we also want to look at the positive risk as well. So these are also referred to as opportunities. And this is when it's something that if it happens, it's going to benefit your project. So this means we could deliver the product earlier, we can reduce the cost, or we can increase that overall business value. So I just want to look at a couple of different potential risks that you might experience on a project. So like something like a supply chain disruption. So if your key supplier fails to deliver your materials on time, that's going to be a negative risk, right? Because it can delay your project and potentially increase the cost. But if there's something like a new technology comes out because there's been a breakthrough, I mean, that seems like that happens every day at this point with AI. But if something were to something like that were to happen during your project, that could be a positive risk that would lead to some sort of faster completion or even reducing the cost of the project. Then we have things that kind of fall into like a medium category, right? So like, for example, you could have a scope change request on your project. So if a stakeholder requests to have additional features added to the product that you're creating, this could be a negative risk, right? Because it could cause delays, it can mess up your schedule, it could actually add to the cost of the project. However, if you take a positive mindset, you can also look at how this risk might actually benefit your project by adding more business value in the end, actually then making a better return on investment. So many of the risks that you might encounter on your project aren't going to be strictly negative or positive. It's going to depend on how you as the project manager and the members of your project team respond to the risk. So one potential challenge can become an opportunity if it's handled correctly. So now that we understand the two sides of risk, I want to explore how the risk management process applies when dealing with positive risk and opportunities. So whether we're dealing with a threat or an opportunity, we're still going to follow the same structured process to manage uncertainty effectively. So in project management, we have a rich management process, and that's a structured approach to helping your team identify, analyze, and respond to risk, whether positive or negative. If you have been around since the PMBOK 6, that was what was known as the risk management knowledge area. Now it's referred to as uncertainty in the project domains in the PMBOK 7 or in adaptive project environments. So we're just we're going to walk through these risk processes and see how we would apply them differently when looking at positive risk. So the first step in risk management is looking at how we're going to build our project plan. So plan for risk management. In this section, that's where we determine how we will go about executing risk management for this project. In project management, we want to always tailor our project plan to fit our project, right? The size, the scope, the length, the duration, all those things are going to impact how much of the planning you do in advance. Even in agile projects, you still want to take time to develop or at least think about your risk management planning. So how much risk management do you need for your project? How much uncertainty exists? I would say that in agile projects as well, because the whole point of using an agile process is because there's a high level uncertainty. That is probably when you always want to actually make sure you're doing a process for risk management, because it just inherently creates more risk in that type of environment. So you can build your plan, your agile plan, and choose an appropriate agile methodology to account for that. So for this discussion, that we want to make sure whether we're doing agile, hybrid, or predictive, we're thinking about the positive risk as well. So again, part of the plan risk management is going to be defining a strategy on how opportunities will be identified, analyzed, and leveraged. So we want to think about how we're going to look at the negative risk, but then also how are we going to look at the positive risk as well. We want to ensure that our risk categories are going to include both threats and opportunities in our risk register. And we want to encourage our team to have that proactive mindset to embrace the opportunities when they're identified or when they arise. So you want to make sure all of that is incorporated into your planning risk management process. The next step is identifying risk. And this, again, is we want to make sure we're looking at both negative and positive opportunities that could impact your project. So we tend to default to asking the question, what could go wrong when we get to this stage in our planning? But we want to make sure we're also asking questions like, so what could go well? Or what innovations, external market shifts, or resources advantages could benefit this project? Are there potential synergies that we could leverage? Other questions, right? So things like, if we're going to do brainstorming to help identify the risk or any of the other different tools and techniques that we might use, we want to make sure we're looking at it both from a positive and a negative approach whenever we're doing the identifying risk process. So if you think about different techniques, so like the SWOT analysis, assumption analysis, if you're using some sort of prompt like the VUCA, I just drew a blank at some of the other ones, but they have the prompts out there as well. So all of those things, you want to make sure you're both considering the negative and positive aspects that could affect your project. The third step in the risk management process is perform qualitative analysis. So this is where we're going to prioritize risk based on their likelihood and impact. So one other way to kind of phrase this is the likelihood or probability, but the benefit. So instead of the impact, we can look at it as the benefit it could have. That kind of helps change that mindset from a negative to a positive. So in this instance, we want to look at how likely is the opportunity to occur. If it happens, how much of a benefit could it bring? And then you also want to be able to answer the question, is this something you should proactively pursue to make sure it happens, right? Or do you just want to monitor it? So we often use a probability and impact matrix to assess threats, but you can also create a separate matrix just for opportunities called an opportunity management matrix that's going to help you to determine which opportunities should be exploited, enhanced, accepted, etc. So the fourth step in any risk management process is going to be conducting quantitative analysis. So quantitative analysis is where you begin to assign numerical values to risk. So you want to look at how you can estimate the financial or the schedule impact that any risks may have on your project. So one of the things that to know too, depending on how you determined how you created your risk management plan, this is something that you may or may not do depending on the size or scope of your project. So if this has been determined to not be necessary, right, then you might skip this part, but you want to make sure you're also making that decision based on both the negative and the positive aspects. So when conducting quantitative analysis for positive risks, we can use the similar tools, but then take it from a different perspective. So looking at things like expected monetary value. Using that technique, you can calculate the financial benefits of a positive risk. You can also use tools like Monte Carlo simulations, and you can use those scenarios to look at opportunities specifically as opposed to just the negative risk or the threats. You can also use decision tree analysis to evaluate different paths and their potential outcomes, so you have a better understanding of how different actions or inaction may impact any or have an influence or effect on any potential opportunity that you've identified. So by applying quantitative analysis, that's where you're going to determine whether an opportunity is worth actively pursuing based on any potential benefit. The next step is to plan risk responses. So just like we would with negative risks that we've identified, we want to take steps to actually plan actions to make sure that we're taking full advantage of any opportunities out there through the positive risks that we have identified. So unlike negative risks, where we want to try to avoid them, mitigate them, transfer them, or something like that, with positive risks, we're going to look at different response strategies. And we'll go into these a little bit more later on in the presentation. But we want to look at things like how to exploit it, how to enhance it, we can share it, accept it, etc. So you want to use this stage to plan the right response to make sure that you're taking full advantage of any opportunity you identified. Next, we're going to implement those risk responses. So again, like you would when you're doing any sort of negative risk response mitigation or planning or activity, right? We want to make sure we're also doing those for the positive. So in this aspect, we want to take deliberate action to exploit or enhance any opportunities we've identified. We want to make sure we're ensuring that all the parties are benefiting from any sort of shared approach. And then we also want to track any performance improvements that are going to result from those positive risks, right? Are we realizing the benefits that we anticipated realizing? Did we identify new things? Did new things come up, right? So that's always going to be part of that process as well. Then we're going to continue to monitor our risk. So this is the last process in the risk management process knowledge area. So just like with anything, we want to monitor all the actions we've taken to make sure that they're having the opportunity. So we want to also keep an eye on any new opportunities. Is there opportunities to change our strategy, address where we're going? Do we need to enhance our activities, change them, or we're taking a different approach to make sure risks happen? So by continuously monitoring the risks, we're going to ensure that we're not just reacting to threats, but then also actively seizing new opportunities as they arise. Great. So now we've kind of covered how the risk management processes are going to apply to positive risk. We want to look at a few different tools and how we can use them to assess positive risk on a project. So if anyone's been in project management for a while, we talk about our tools and techniques, right? So we want to look at how we can use different tools and techniques to focus specifically on positive risk. So doing things like how do we assess the impact or benefit, right? And then the likelihood or the probability of it happening. How do we use these tools and techniques to determine the best response strategy? How we might prioritize it against other project risks, or how we might communicate it effectively to stakeholders. So using structured tools are going to help you do all of those things and make data-driven decisions. So we're going to focus on 3 key tools today and go over them briefly about how you can use them when you're doing risk management for positive risk. So it's going to be the opportunity management matrix, which I mentioned earlier, another tool called force field analysis, and then we're going to look at the cost-benefit analysis and ratio. Each of these tools gives you a different perspective on how to evaluate and act on positive risk, which will help make the most of opportunities that are going to come your way. So let's start with looking at the opportunity management matrix. So this may be very similar to something you've had because we use this as a probability and impact matrix in negative risk management analysis, right? So this is that heat style map that we use to evaluate opportunities based on 2 key factors. And as we were talking about the processes earlier, so this is something that you would use during that qualitative, sorry, I always want to make sure I'm saying those right because the words are so close to each other. Qualitative risk analysis. So here we're going to look at the probability of the event or likelihood of something happening, right? So how likely is this to occur? And again, these can be really subjective just based on the information that you have. So that's why it's really important when you're doing any sort of risk management analysis to include your team, your subject matter experts, your stakeholders, because everyone's going to have valuable information. And the more information you have, the more likely you are to be accurate in your estimations, right? So we're going to, on the other axis, is the benefit. So if it happens, how much value will it bring to the project? So in this instance, so each opportunity is going to be plotted onto the matrix, and the heat map's going to help you determine which opportunities should be actively pursued versus those that should be monitored or deprioritized. So if we look at this, if we have something that's in the top right corner, so we have a high probability and a high benefit, those are going to be what you want to call your golden opportunities, right? It's a high value and high likelihood, and you want to be actively pursuing that. So in that instance, you're going to look at, prioritize that closer to the top. Then you have like a high probability, but low benefit. So that's something that's likely to happen, but you may have very little impact to your project. So you also want to consider that. You might have something that's a low probability, but a high benefit. So I would look at those as something that would be a big win if it were to happen, but the chances of it happening is really low, right? So you want to look for ways to address those specifically when you get into the next steps. And then you might have something that's low probability and low benefit. So then you might say, okay, yeah, this is great, but we're not really going to put much effort into making it happen or try to make it happen. But this type of structured approach is going to help ensure that you're focusing on what matters and what has the most probability and likelihood and impact for your project. So for example, let's say we're looking at a product launch and we identify that an unexpected industry trend, and that if we leveraged it, we could potentially increase our sales by 25%. So we, in talking to our project team, right, we assess that there's a medium to high probability that this would happen. And if it does happen, the benefit is going to be very high. So you're going to place this on sort of it's going to be all the way to the right, maybe in the second or third column, right? So you want to make sure that that is plotted up there in the high colored zone. So now let's compare that to another potential opportunity, right? Where there's a technological breakthrough that would reduce production costs, but it's highly uncertain, right? So then you'd be very low probability, but with a high benefit. So then that would put that into that like medium box on the bottom right. So you're going to be able to see that obviously the first one is a higher priority and you want to spend more time, resources, effort to making sure that one happens versus the other one. So next we're going to go into look at the force field analysis. So this is a decision-making tool that's going to help you weigh the driving forces. So driving forces are going to be factors that's going to push an opportunity forward against the restraining forces. So these are factors that hold it back. So it's going to help if we can help us answer a few key questions. So what factors or what driving forces are supporting this opportunity? What obstacles might prevent us from capitalizing on it? And then how can we reduce resistance and strengthen the supporting forces? So by going through this process and mapping out these forces, we can make informed decisions on whether to pursue, modify, or abandon an opportunity. So let's apply this tool to a real example. So imagine a company has the opportunity to implement AI-driven automation, which could improve efficiency by 30%. So before moving forward, the team's going to conduct a force field analysis. So in this instance, we have driving forces. So the driving forces that we have identified for this opportunity include increased productivity, right? So automation is going to reduce the manual work and increase the overall efficiency. Then we're going to have cost savings. So long-term reductions in labor costs and human error are going to create a cost savings, which can potentially outweigh any cost of the technology implementation. then we also have a competitive advantages. By adopting this technology early, we can position the company ahead of our competitors. And then for the last one, we're going to include better decision making, because the AI is going to provide us real-time insights to help us in making decisions about project execution. Now we're going to look at the restraining forces. So again, these are also the obstacles to the opportunity. So in this instance, we're going to say resistance to change. So employees may worry about job security or struggle to adopt AI, right? Because you're bringing in a new technology. So one, and this is very common, we hear all the time actually that people are concerned that the new AI technology is going to replace them and take away their job. But there's also a learning curve that comes with AI as well, right? So even if your employees are excited about it, if they don't know how to use the AI, you can't derive the full benefits of that technology. Additionally, there's high implementation costs. So the initial investment in AI tools and training can be expensive. You could have integration issues. So it has to work seamlessly with any existing systems and workflows. And then the last is that there's potential data privacy concerns. So AI is going to rely on a vast amount of data that could raise security and compliance risks. So now that we've laid out both of these forces visually, you and your team can see where adjustments are needed to reduce barriers and increase support for the opportunity. So once we understand all of the forces at play, we can look to ask questions like, so how can we strengthen the driving forces? So for example, we might be able to offer training programs that are going to reduce the resistance to change. We can or eliminate restraining forces by starting with a small AI pilot program before doing full implementation. So these are going to be identify ways for you guys to help, think of ways. It allows you to see areas where you can help boost the opportunity and enhance its ability or probability of happening, and also decrease any sort of negative impact or resistance that you might have to taking this forward. So if the driving forces can outweigh the restraining forces, it's going to be a strong sign that you should move forward with the opportunity. And if not, you may need to adjust your approach or reconsider the investment. Now that we've explored force field analysis, we're going to look at the cost-benefit analysis ratio. So, and this is the last tool we are going to highlight today. So, in doing cost-benefit analysis, this is going to be a straightforward method to determine whether an opportunity is financially worth pursuing or not. So, we're going to look at comparing the total cost, so the amount that the investment required to capitalize on the opportunity, versus the total benefits or the total expected benefits, right? Because some of that is guesswork, because we can't always tell exactly what's going to happen. But that's the expected financial gain you're going to receive from pursuing the opportunity. So as a result of the cost benefit, the result of those two things becomes that cost benefit ratio. And that's going to tell you whether the benefit outweighs the cost. So the cost benefit ratio equals the total benefits divided by the total cost. So if your cost benefit ratio is greater than 1, then the opportunity is financially beneficial. So and that means that the gains, right, the money that you're going to make in the end is going to exceed the cost of the project. If the cost benefit ratio equals 1, that just means the opportunity breaks even and the costs and benefits are going to be equal. And then if the cost benefit ratio is less than 1, then the opportunity may not be worth the investment. So in that instance, the cost is going to outweigh any potential benefit. So if you calculate this ratio, your project team can help make informed financial decisions about which opportunities to pursue or not. So when we talk about the strategies in the next section, having information like this cost benefit ratio is going to help you determine the best mitigation strategy or implementation strategy to take best advantage of that opportunity. So now that we've looked at some tools, we're going to move on to determining how to respond to risk. So just like we develop response strategies for negative risk, we also need to have structured strategies for managing opportunities. When identifying a positive risk, we want to ask ourselves, should we actively pursue it? Can we increase the likelihood or impact of it happening? Right? So likelihood and impact is also probability and benefit. We also need to ask if we need to involve others to maximize the benefit, and as if is the opportunity within our authority to act on. So this is where those risk response strategies are going to come into play. For negative risk, our goal is always going to be to reduce or eliminate any threats. We do this through strategies like avoiding, mitigating, transferring, right? For positive risk, our approach is going to be just slightly different. And we're going to focus on how to maximize opportunities. So instead of avoiding risk, we want to leverage it for the project's benefit. And today we're going to look at the 5 key strategies for responding to positive risk. So we accept, we share, enhance, exploit, and or elevate. So each of these strategies is going to give you a way to intentionally manage positive risk, ensuring that opportunities don't just happen by chance. We actively work to capture their benefits. So let's start with the first strategy, accept, and explore when it makes sense to take a hands-off approach to an opportunity. So acceptance is the most passive approach to managing project risk. While some opportunities are going to require action, others are best left to unfold naturally. In some instances, you may not have any options to take any action, right? It's just either going to happen or it's not going to happen, and it's completely out of our control. We're just going to accept that it's there, watch it, and if we can realize it, we're going to realize it. Accepting a positive risk means that we're not going to take any action. No proactive steps are going to be taken beyond monitoring it. So the opportunity is not guaranteed to happen, and the cost of pursuing it may be too high. So if I decide that, it would be really great if this thing happens, but there may be no financial benefit, or that the money that we would spend in order to take advantage of this is so high that we won't get any sort of return on investment. So that's when that cost benefit ratio comes into play. Maybe we have limited resources and we don't have the money, time, energy, people, whatever, to do anything else than just accept the risk. Or the opportunity may naturally occur without any intervention. So rather investing our time and resources, the project team's going to monitor this opportunity and be prepared to act if and when necessary it ends up happening or not happening, right? So imagine you're managing a construction project, and let's say like the weather is forecasted to be ideal conditions for the next several months. So that means that your project could go on without being interrupted by weather and end up being ahead of schedule, because I don't know if you've ever done any construction projects, but you're always going to want to build in some time for bad weather, right? Because that could mean a work stoppage. So if you don't have to use those snow days, let's say, then you can potentially finish your project ahead of schedule. So you may be able to see that as a potential opportunity. However, we have no control over the weather, right? Either the weather is good or the weather isn't good. And we just deal with whatever the weather is every day. So we understand that if the weather is good for the entire time of the project, we can finish early and ahead of schedule and make our customers happy. However, we can't do anything. So we're just going to put this potential opportunity in the accept bucket, right? So we want to make sure that when we decide to use this strategy, so we want to ask some questions like, does the opportunity require additional resources to act on? If yes, then maybe we want to consider another strategy. We want to look at, will the opportunity naturally occur without intervention? So again, accepting it may be the best approach. And then, is there uncertainty in whether the opportunity will happen? So if so, monitoring it may be the most cost-effective option than actively pursuing it. So the next strategy is sharing. So this is all going to be about collaboration. So unlike in our accepting the strategy where you take no action, sharing is going to be sharing a positive risk is going to mean you're going to partner with another party to maximize the opportunity and its benefits. So when an opportunity arises that may be too large, too complex, or too resource intensive for one organization to handle, sharing the risk will allow multiple parties to jointly benefit from it. So this strategy is commonly used if the opportunity is going to require some sort of specialized expertise that another organization has. The potential benefit can be increased through a strategic partnership, or the investment needed to capitalize on the opportunity is too high for one party to take on alone. So, this is probably most commonly happens in, think like Shark Tank, right? Like, so you have an investment opportunity, right? And you need to take a risk, but you don't have the resources to do it, but the sharks will come in and they'll share that risk with you, right? And invest in your company. So that's a way that share. Bringing on like a subcontractor that could provide a capability that you don't have, or even just boost your manpower, because if you're able to finish a job early, you get some sort of like a cost plus fee, right? Like for early completion. So those are ways that you could take advantage of an early opportunity by sharing it. So partnering with another entity, you're able to mitigate any individual risk. You can share your resources and maximize your overall value of the opportunity. So let's talk about another example here. So you have a small software company and you're developing an innovative AI-driven project management tool. So this tool, because your company is so amazing, has the potential to revolutionize project tracking. But your company lacks the marketing reach and distribution channels to fully capitalize on the opportunity. So instead of trying to scale alone, you're going to partner with a global tech firm that already has a well-established customer base. So this partnership will allow the smaller company to reach more clients and the larger company to offer cutting-edge technology to its users. So in this sense, by sharing the risk, both parties are going to benefit. The small company expands faster than it could alone, and the larger company gains a competitive advantage in the market. So when we're looking at sharing positive risk, we want to make the following take into consideration the following things. So would another party benefit from the opportunity as well, right? So we can't necessarily bring in a partner if they're not going to see any sort of positive positive result out of it as well. Does the opportunity require expertise or resources beyond what we have? So if yes, then a partnership could fill that gap. So think about different resources too. So it's human resources, but it could be facilities, equipment, all of those things could be part of that. Or is the opportunity too costly or complex to manage alone? So yes, if the answer is yes, then collaboration can reduce any sort of individual risk while ensuring the opportunity is pursued. So the next strategy is called enhancing. So in enhancing, we're going to take deliberate steps to increase the likelihood or the impact of a positive risk. So sometimes an opportunity won't naturally reach its full potential on its own. So in these cases, we want to enhance the opportunity by taking proactive measures to make sure it's more likely to occur or to increase its impact if it does. So this strategy is best used when the opportunity is likely to happen, but we can take actions to increase its probability, or the impact of the probability could be greater if given more resources or support, and if there are specific proactive steps that we can take to strengthen the opportunity. So by enhancing the opportunity, we're going to boost its value and maximize the benefits it can bring to the project. So let's say a company is launching a new mobile app, and early beta testing is showing unexpectedly high user engagement, suggesting the potential for viral growth. So the company recognizes this positive risk, but doesn't want to leave success to chance. So in this instance, to enhance the opportunity, this company wants to invest in additional marketing to fuel momentum, optimize the app's features to encourage more user sharing, and then increase server capacity to handle a potential surge in demand. So by taking these proactive steps, they're going to increase the likelihood and the impact of the opportunity, turning a possible success into a high impact reality. Additionally, one thing to point out in this one too is that if they were to not take these steps, it could actually have a significant negative impact to their product. Because if this is something that's kind of likely to happen, but we're just kind of giving it that extra boost. So if they did nothing and this did happen, it's possible that like their server could have crashed because it couldn't handle the surge, or which would actually have a bigger negative impact on the company in the project than it would be, going the opposite way. So in this instance, by recognizing this as something that is a risk, right, that may or may not happen, they were able to turn something that could potentially be a negative risk into something that is a positive risk. So whenever we're looking at whether or not to enhance a positive risk, we want to ask ourselves, can we take specific actions to increase the likelihood of the opportunity? So if yes, then enhancing can be a smart approach. So would the additional investment or resources significantly increase the impact? So if yes, then the strategy is going to help maximize the benefits as well. And then lastly, is there existing momentum that we can amplify? So if yes, then enhancing is going to ensure that you capitalize on the opportunity rather than letting it pass by. Now, the last strategy we're going to talk about, not the last one, but we're going to talk about exploiting. So this is the strategy that we're going to use to ensure that the opportunity happens and that we maximize its benefits. So when we're talking about exploiting a positive risk, we're going to talk about taking deliberate action to make sure it happens. So instead of passively monitoring or gradually enhancing it, we're going to commit resources and strategies to fully capture the opportunity's benefits. So this is best used when the opportunity is highly likely to happen and we want to guarantee that it does. That when the potential benefits are going to be substantial and we want to make sure we extract all the value we possibly can out of it. And when there are clear steps that we can take to ensure the success. So by exploiting a positive risk, we treat it as a must-have opportunity and not just a probability. So for example, let's imagine an e-commerce company is gearing up for a major holiday sales event. So their market research shows an unexpected surge in customer demand. So that's a positive risk that if we can capitalize on it, it can dramatically boost sales. So just standing by and waiting for it to happen and naturally increase, we're going to go ahead and exploit the opportunity by scaling up the inventory to meet any sort of expected demand, investing in aggressive digital marketing campaigns to help drive more traffic, and expand the customer support resources to handle the influx of orders. So by taking these deliberate actions, we can ensure that the opportunity happens, that the company increases the potential revenue and maximizes its competitive advantage. I would also say this is another case where if they did not take any action, since it was highly likely to happen anyways, that if they didn't scale up their inventory or expand their customer support, that could have been a negative risk, right? It could have turned out to have a negative impact on the situation, because if they ran out of supply, then it didn't matter if they had more customers because they had nothing else to sell. If they couldn't have the customer support to handle all the customers coming in, that could also be a negative as well. So again, just another instance where you can turn a negative into a positive. So we just want to, for the last bit, so when we're looking to exploit an opportunity, we want to make sure we're asking ourselves, is the opportunity highly probable and valuable? So if yes, then we want to exploit it to make sure we don't miss out. Can we directly control or influence the opportunity? So if yes, then we should take the action to secure the benefit. And the last one would be, if failing to act would mean losing out on a competitive advantage. And so if the answer is yes, then the strategy is going to be the best to capitalize on the opportunity. And now the last one. So the last one is going to be elevate, because sometimes an opportunity is just going to be beyond our level of authority at the project level. So sometimes if we identify an opportunity and it's too significant to act on at our level, we want to make sure we're escalating the opportunity to higher decision makers who have authority, resources, and strategic oversight capable of taking an action. So this is going to be best when the strategy of elevating is going to highlight the opportunity because it affects the whole organization beyond the project level, or it's going to require resources and approval that exceeds the project scope, which we all know as project managers, right? There's usually some sort of a cutoff as to what the project manager can decide. And then senior leadership is going to need to weigh in on any potential benefits or risk. So by elevating a positive risk, we ensure high-value opportunities don't get overlooked due to project limitations. So a good example was if you're working on a project, you have a project team and they're working on a new product launch and through that process, they discover a strong demand for an international expansion. So that's something that wasn't originally part of the project plan. So the potential market opportunity could significantly increase company revenue. However, to go international, it's going to require executive approval because of the regulatory, financial, and operational planning that becomes involved in that. So instead of ignoring it, though, the project manager or you can escalate it to senior leadership, right? Because the potential market size and revenue increase because of the competitive advantage it's going to give you for early entry into the market. And because you need to have additional resources to make it successful. So when you elevate this opportunity, you can get leadership involved to help make an informed decision about whether to pursue the expansion or not. This will allow this company to not miss some game-changing opportunity that has been presented to it. So when you're looking at elevation, you want to make sure you're asking the questions. Does this opportunity have a broader impact beyond the project? If yes, then it's going to require a higher level decision. Does acting on the opportunity require executive approval or funding? So if yes, then elevation ensures that your right people, the right decision makers get involved. And could this opportunity shape company strategy or long-term success? So if yes, then it should be escalated to leadership for strategic alignment. And then that completes our positive risk management strategies. So now that we've covered the strategies, I just want to do kind of a quick wrap up and step back and talk about something that's really important, which is our mindset. So when we're looking at approaching risk management, we often get so focused on that negative side, all the wrong things that are going to happen, that again, we forget to ask ourselves what could go right. So we want to make sure we are enabling that with our project teams by spotlighting potential advantages that others might overlook, create value beyond just staying on schedule and budget, and foster a culture that encourages innovation and strategic thinking. So If we shift that to a balanced mindset, we're going to move from simply reacting to risks to actively shaping project outcomes for the better. So you can do this by encouraging open discussions, embedding opportunity identification as part of your risk management process, and then also challenging assumptions. You don't want to assume that a risk is always negative, right? So even when you're identifying negative risk, you want to say, hey, can we turn this around and turn it into a positive? So having that right mindset is going to help you take that proactive and positive approach to risk management. The next, again, now is our approach, right? So the key is going to be using same proven processes that we use for negative risk management, but adding that positive aspect to it to give it a balance of perspective. So we don't necessarily have to change the processes and tools and techniques. We just need to ask our questions differently. So instead of just always looking at what could go wrong, we need to look at what can go right. So by making that a consistent practice, you're going to ensure that you aren't just protecting your projects, but you're also looking for ways to improve them. So we want to look at how we can do that. We're going to think about like how do we expand risk identification techniques to make them both make it a standard practice to identify both threats and opportunities when you're using tools like risk register, brainstorming, SWOT analysis. We want to use tools to assess opportunities such as the opportunity management matrix, the forest field analysis, and the cost benefit analysis that we discussed earlier. And we want to ensure that our leadership and teams are going to embrace opportunities by encouraging them to see risk discussions as a way to create value and not just prevent a failure. So by integrating both threat mitigation and opportunity maximization, you can transform risk management into a strategic enabler instead of just a safety net. All right, so as we wrap up, I just want to reflect a little bit on what we covered today and open it up in case anybody has any questions. You can go ahead and just drop it into the chat or the Q&A. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes. Okay, so we have a question that says, most risk management frameworks focus on threats rather than opportunities. How can teams incorporate positive risk identification into traditional risk management processes? So I think it goes back to just the mindset and the approach, right? One, I think a lot of teams get held up in the fact that just the word risk in our minds just always brings up and is associated with something that's negative. We just need to understand that risk can also be positive as well, right? And then we need to make sure as we're going through, so when we're brainstorming with our teams at that identify risk, that second process in the risk management processes, right? We're going to do brainstorming and try to identify every possible risk. When people focus on that negative, just want to make sure you're being intentional about asking, so what are all the things that could go right? So you're not just focusing on all the things that go wrong. One of the things that I like to talk about with my students when I teach the PMP exam prep and we go through simulated project, so I will have them try to look at every negative risk that they have identified and see, so not only is this a negative, is there a way that we can turn this negative risk into a positive, right? So you want to make sure you're just building that mindset so that the whole team is looking at risk from both perspectives and making sure you're using the tools and techniques to address both perspectives too as you do risk management. So I hope that answered the question. And then we have the next question is, will the recording be available to those on the call today? Yes, give us maybe a day or two to just process it, and then we're going to post it on YouTube and we'll send out a link, and then you can use that link to review it if you want to again. Okay, so we're coming up on the last couple minutes here. Is there any last questions? Might see hands raised. Okay. And just the last slide. So we do a webinar at the first Thursday of every month at 1:00. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can use that QR code there. That's where we post all of the dates. You can also go to our website and sign up for any future webinars there. And then also you'll see there's the PDU claim code on the screen. This will also get sent out to you in an email if you have participated today. And then when you go to your PMI.org account, if you have a PMI certification, you can just put in this claim code and it automatically knows the class you took, how many credits it's worth or PDUs it's worth, etc. And that will be applied to your account automatically. So thank you so much and have a great day. Goodbye.